When you are in the sexual act, you are touching the tree of life. But remember the commandment, don't eat of it. You touch the tree and you eat the fruit, and that's precisely the problem. What Jehovah Elohim said is that you shall not eat of it. Right? And the woman says, not even touch it. Right? But then the serpent, according to Zohar, said, no. The thing is, you shall not eat. You can touch it. Look, I touch it and I don't die. And it's true. Because Elohim touched it and I don't die. But if you eat it, you will die. But and then when Eve said, okay, I will touch it and I will try not to eat it. But she ate it and gave it to Adam. And they liked the orgasm. He says, oh, this is a good fruit. He says that you forgot about that. It's for animals, not for us. And then they are kicked out of eating. If you eat it, when you fornicate, you make lust and then the rest of egos inside. And you become idolatrous. Even if you don't have in your home statues and you think that only God you worship, but you are a fornicator, you are also a killer. Because you are killing the life. Or as in esotericism we say, any bodhisattva that falls into animal generation is accused of having killed the god Mercury, or the Mercurius, which is the sexual energy. What are you performing when you are in fornication? The Zohar explains the different. You are a thief as well, but a bad thief. After the orgasm of the animals. And the serpent said unto the woman, this is the next graphic, ye shall not surely die, for Elohim doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil. But when you eat it as God, or with God, together with God, and you eat it, and then your eyes are open. But it's written that Adam and Eve, or whether Eve tasted the fruit, which was the orgasm that they taste, and give it to the brain. And both saw that they were naked completely, without energy, without force. So we have two serpents here. The first is the tempting serpent, and the other is the serpent that gives life, which is the Kundalini. Humanity is following, of course, the tempting serpent. Because in the sexual embrace, when the flesh is receiving that magnetism in male and female, they enter into the temple, but to fornicate. And that's precisely to filth the tabernacle of God. Not to eat means to perform the sexual act and to transmute. To eat means to reach the orgasm, the spasm of the animals, which in this planet Earth, everybody is eating, having a feast of the apple of tree, right? But you have to be careful. In this day and age, is precisely what people receive, teachings. That some women are difficult to reach the orgasm, so they have to teach her. Women are, in past times, chaste by nature. But in this day and age, there's a lot of pornography there and filthy things that teach the woman how to fornicate, how to reach the orgasm, and that's bad. In other words, the woman had to be more bestial as she already is, and how the man can be more bestial as he already is. But remember, the choice is yours. Take the path of the good or the evil. It's up to you.
During the sexual ecstasy, the couple is surrounded by a tremendous and terribly divine energy. In these moments of supreme joy and ardent kisses that inflame the depths of the soul, we can retain that marvelous light to completely purify and transform ourselves. When we spill the glass of Hermes, when the loss occurs, the light of the gods depart, leaving open the door so the red and sanguineous light of Lucifer can enter. The Garden of Eden and the fall of man is all about this. That's what it's about. In the Garden of Eden and the fall of man, the original sin wasn't eating the apple. The apple represented tasting the sexual energies. That was a horrible reference, I'm sorry. But that's what it was. Experiencing that energy and really liking that energy. That's when we satisfied our animal passions. The snake in that context represented the ego, and the ego tempted us to experience the loss of the energies. And at that point, we became addicted to the loss of the energies. That's the reason, or that's the temptation we gave into. It's the forbidden fruit. We got kicked out of Eden. What was the representation of being kicked out of Eden? We lost the superior bodies. We can no longer access the higher dimensions. Okay, so the original sin wasn't eating some apple. It was taking on that forbidden knowledge, the experience of the sexual energies, and taking the sexual energies from the higher self and directing it to the egos. Okay, so the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden represents the egos. That was the temptation we gave into. It was basically lust that we gave into and fed the ego of lust. And from that, we left the higher dimensions because we no longer use the energies to fuel the superior bodies. We found ourselves kicked out of Eden, so to speak. Okay, the original sin was the spilling of the energies, the losing those energies and feeding them directly to the ego, not keeping them to transcend or transmute on those different levels and build the solar bodies. Because if we can generate that energy during the sex act, which is like charging the battery, that's when the energy flows, that's when the energy generates. Obviously during the sex act itself, there's a lot of energy being generated there. We can do two things with that energy. We can lose it and experience the physical expression of that energy, which is the orgasm and causing all that energy to be lost and discharged, or we can refrain that energy. Okay, we can literally stop the sex act before reaching the point of orgasm, which is what Tantra is all about. But the difference being, the idea is if we can sustain the physical expression of that energy, we can reach a different level. Okay, we can reach a different experience. We can reach a much higher level. Let's go biblical, because I was picking on the Christians today, so let's pull out some biblical references. Whoever has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him. What does it mean for seed to remain in him? I mean, it's literally what it says. That means it doesn't spill the sexual energies. And he cannot sin because he has been born of God. To be born of God means to turn yourself into a divine being, which is to develop the solar bodies. Okay, so he has been born of God. He who has the solar bodies doesn't sin because he has no ego, for his seed remains in him, for his energy is sustaining not the ego, but the higher self. And that's why he can't sin, because he's been born of God. Jesus practiced this with Mary Magdalene. That's what he did. Jesus was a master. Mary and Joseph, Jesus' parents, who were awakened masters, they practiced alchemy. Okay, going back to that reference, it wasn't that Mary was a virgin, it was Mary was free from sin. How was Mary free from sin? Well, because she was an awakened master. She developed the solar bodies. Her and Joseph were working in alchemy. They gave birth to a divine child. That divine child was Jesus. Jesus also had a wife too. That was what Mary Magdalene was. And Jesus practiced alchemy. Okay? Joseph and Mary practicing alchemy, that was the sex without spilling. That's the virginal birth. You can think of it that way. Okay? Technically, Joseph didn't, lose any fluids, so you could say, well, it's kind of virginal from that context, but it's really the same idea. The sexual force had the power to create us and is the only force that can radically transform us. We left Eden through the gates of sex, and it's only through the gates of sex that we can return back to Eden. This is you can think of this as the womb where all the divine beings are gestated, the physical world. That's the meaning of life. That's why we're here. Okay, we were put here to awaken consciousness and ascend back to the source. Ironically, the seeds of the divine begin in the physical. We need the physical body because we need these energies. And we need to transmute these energies from a higher and higher octave, developing the solar bodies as we go. Now, it sounds like a strange thing to talk about. So, because what I'm basically saying here is, with the sex act itself, that's an incredibly important key to awakening the consciousness. It's an important tool. It's part of the process. It always was part of the process. We're talking about using the sexual energies to basically take the physical body that we have and then transform those energies into the vital body, then transform them into the mental, the causal, as we go up the ladder, building the solar bodies. It sounds like a strange thing. Yeah, you probably haven't come across this before, but you know what? That's not a Gnostic thing. It's something that's been around. That is the greatest secret that humanity has. That's the one missing piece of the puzzle that a lot of people are missing. This teaching has been known to many cultures under all kinds of secret names. That's what alchemy was. People are still looking for the secret ingredient to turn lead into gold. It was never about making lead, some metal, into gold. You know what? In the earlier times, lead and gold, they were just as important. Lead was actually better than gold in many instances because lead was softer and you could work with it easier. Okay? Gold is really important to us now, but hundreds of years ago, lead, they did stuff with lead. You could build all kinds of things with lead. Lead was a useful metal. We think of lead as a garbage metal and gold as something that was worth money. But you know what? Go back 1,000 years, didn't really make much difference. Okay? What is alchemy? Alchemy was turning lead into gold. What did lead represent? The lunar bodies. What was gold representing? The solar bodies. What did you need in order to turn lead into gold? You needed the mercury. What was the mercury? The sexual energies. What's the missing ingredient? Nobody knows what the hell the philosopher's stone was. They can try to recreate the experiments, but it never works because the missing ingredient is the philosopher's stone. We don't know what chemical or material the philosopher's stone was. The philosopher's stone was an analogy for the sex act itself. All the alchemical texts was a way to take the knowledge and hide it. Because could you imagine trying to talk about sexual energies in the sex act in like the 800s or the 1200s? You'd be burned alive for heretics and blasphemy and pornography and all kinds of stuff. So the alchemical texts, they were a way to hide the knowledge. All the great alchemists were people awakening consciousness. Okay, and the crucible that you needed for alchemy, the crucible that everything had to be in order to develop, the crucible was a symbol for a woman's womb. That was the crucible where all the ingredients had to be placed in order for the gold to appear. So all the alchemical texts, when you go back with these things in mind, they suddenly take on a whole different light. These things were a way to talk about sex and the sex act in a time when it wasn't possible to talk about that. The Hindus' culture, they had the Saha Maituna, which was their sex act. And we're all familiar with the Kama Sutra, right? You look at the Kama Sutra, you think of the Hindus, you're like, boy, there's some pretty horny people. All their temples actually were covered with idols of sex acts. You go to some of their temples and the walls, there's carvings of people in all kinds of positions. You're like, wow, these people know how to have a good time. For them, sex and religion were basically the same thing. They weren't writing favorite position sex manuals. They were writing the way to see God. For them, it was the same thing. The Kama Sutra wasn't just a book of kinky sex positions. The Kama Sutra was a handbook, a manual to the awakening of consciousness. And in the early days of couples awakening consciousness, it was only done in the temples in order to keep it holy and keep it magical. That's why they had the temples that were all, carved with all this symbolism around them. You've probably heard of Tantrism before. When most people think of Tantrism, they think of it as trying to have sex for as long as possible, sustaining the orgasm kind of as long as you can. Well, that's basically the same thing, but we're looking at it as sustaining it indefinitely. There's a reason why Tantrism was all about sustaining the physical orgasm. It wasn't just so you could be, so guys could be super studs and, please hundreds of women at the same time. That wasn't the idea. The idea behind Tantrism was if you could sustain the physical orgasm, something else happens in its place. Something much more rewarding. For us, the physical orgasm, it's like, imagine, I have all these silly analogies for this stuff. Imagine you're walking down a corridor and you pick up a piece of candy. You're like, ooh, piece of candy, this is great. And you take a candy, eat it, and you walk away. If you'd have kept going and not picked up that first piece of candy, and if you'd have walked down the hallway and turned around the corner, there was a mountain of candy just waiting for you. But we never get there. You think of the orgasm itself and you go, it's, I kind of really like that, and it's a really great experience. But you know what? There's something else that's even better than that. And that's what Tantrism was all about. It was about delaying the orgasm, not just so you could go longer, but because you could go longer to reach a different state. Because that's the thing, there's a different state that we can reach with the sex act that most people haven't got to because they fall into the trap of the physical orgasm and losing the energies. That's what Tantrism was all about. The Egyptians referred to it as the Arcanum AZF. Transmutation is usually how we refer to it in the Gnostic context, and that's usually an alchemical symbol as well. We transmute. To transmute something is take energy in one form and convert it to another form. We're taking the physical sexual energies and converting them into something else, converting them into the energies that feed the solar bodies. Working in the ninth sphere of Kabbalah, the ninth sphere is associated with sex itself. We can think of the ninth sphere, it's kind of almost the same thing as the Philosopher's Stone as well. The Philosopher's Stone was seen as the foundation, sex. And this is interesting, if we talk about the Philosopher's Stone being sex itself, remember Jesus, the whole tale about the guy that built his house on sand and waters came and washed it away, but the guy who built his house on the rock was a different story. The rock itself was sex. There's even a context too. You know the disciple Peter? Well, the Latin name for Peter is what's the Latin name for Peter? I don't know. Petra, right? What is that? It's stone. There's a huge argument that says Peter wasn't Peter, Peter was sex. Every time there was a reference being made to Peter, it wasn't about some guy. It was about the sex act itself. It was an alchemical symbol. Working in the forge of the Vulcan, the forge of Cyclops, that's a Greek symbol. Vulcan was the one who made all the magic weapons, wasn't he? And he made them down in the underworld, and he made them in his magical forge, and if he wore these magical weapons, then he would be protected. If you look at the story of Perseus and Jason of the Argonauts, Perseus, what did he get from Vulcan? He got golden armor that protected him and made him invisible and made him invincible. What was the golden armor? The golden bodies, the solar bodies. The vessel of Hermes. We talk about something having a hermetic seal. When you buy, kitchen jars that have a hermetic seal, what do we associate the hermetic seal with? It means nothing leaks in or nothing leaks out. Well, that's kind of funny that we use the hermetic seal. The original hermetic seal it comes from Hermes Trismegistus. He was a master. And Hermes Trismegistus, he was the one that wrote the Codex, the Emerald Tablet. He was the one responsible for saying for as above, so below, and explaining all these other laws. That's what the hermetic seal was. The hermetic seal is our own bodies. Okay, that no energy was lost outside of the physical body. That's the hermetic seal. Now we use it to mean a really good Tupperware container, ironically, but applying the same idea. An airtight seal, nothing leaks out. You can think of it as the same way.